Win big in 2024 with Team Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from our live draft assistant, free agent finder, and lineup optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code KNUCKLER. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They got free contests. They got paid contests coming to a state near you. They're slashing lines and giving out boosts all day long. Check it out. That's a fun platform. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 139 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that, and we've got UFC Vegas 93 this weekend. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. We got PFL going on right now. Again, a busy week of high-level MMA and boxing. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady for picks and whatnot on all of that stuff. Follow the podcast, like, subscribe, leave favorable comments, tell your friends at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. And come out to the RotoBaller MMA Discord on Saturday. I'll be in there talking about the card throughout the night. Show up. Let's talk about DFS and betting on UFC Vegas 93. And last week, UFC Louisville. Again, some very questionable judging on that card, some questionable reffing too. You know, when you just the Cannonier stoppage alone, it was fun, and we had a decent night of picking on that one. We had some bigger method of victory picks actually come through. But now we're moving on. I've hit 5 of 9 method of victory picks on PFL 4 right now, so I'm cooking on this other business. And this week has also been marred by all the UFC 303 talk. It's pretty much accepted now that Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler is not going to happen. And you feel for Michael Chandler. And then Khamzat Chimaev is apparently violently ill. And he's already been replaced to fight Robert Whittaker. So a lot of stuff going on when it comes to matchups this week. So that's always stressful, but still exciting, when it's like, all right, if this fight's not going to happen, who's it going to be against now? But we got UFC Vegas 93 this week, and again, this was a card that had to get shuffled up a decent amount. Alex Perez was going to fight Tajiro Lembekov, and Tatsuro Taira. Hold on. By the way, the 15-0 Tatsuro Taira. He was supposed to fight Joshua Van, right, and Tim Elliott back in May. Had 2 straight fights canceled. So, we're ending up with a very interesting matchup as the main event. We got good flyweight action. And so now, let's just get into it. The first fight on the card. This is weird. Okay, there we go. A featherweight matchup between Melchizal Costa and Shailin Nurudanbeki. Shailin is the plus 164 underdog. Costa the minus 198 favorite. Costa has lost 2 of 3 in the UFC. Got finished in both of them, both in round 2 against Thiago Moises and Steve Garcia. Not the worst, level of competition. For sure. July 2023 was his lone UFC win. He landed 100 strikes on Austin Lingo and took him down 3 times en route to a unanimous decision. Nurudanbeki, actually 2 years older than Costa. He is the winner of 3 of 5 fights in the UFC. Against Derek Minner, TJ Brown, and Sean Soriano. He is coming off a loss by second-round knockout to Steve Garcia, just like Costa. So, an interesting place for these two to be coming into. I would really like to say that I think Shylin is a good value as the underdog. I give credit to the fact that, like, Costa has a really good win against Austin Lingo. And the guys that, Shylin has beaten, Derek Minner, that doesn't count. That was a thrown fight. TJ Brown and Sean Soriano, both unanimous decisions, just underwhelming. I see why Costa's the favorite. Minus 198 doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Honestly, I don't love betting on this fight at all. I think, the TJ Brown win was good, I guess, for Shylin. But losses to Moises and Garcia, he had a really good fight against Austin Lingo. Damn, this is a really hard one to start off. I don't know. I think, this might be close to, a 50-50 fight or something. I get Shylin's probably the better value. I think for DFS, you go Costa, because I think, we've seen him land triple-digit strikes. Shylin has been underwhelming in the decisions that he does have. If I'm going, either of these two, I'm not going Costa straight up. I'm going anybody straight up at Shylin. And Costa by decision plus 185. Shylin inside the distance is plus 300. I think that's about as good as you're going to get, and that's a tough one. Of all ones, that's already one that I don't love trying to figure out. Next up, we got a women's strawweight matchup between Josephine Knudsen and Julia Pilastri. Julia Pilastri. I don't know why I said that with some twang on it. Plus 150. Knudsen, the minus 180 favorite. Knudsen, winner of all three fights. Technically, sort of at the UFC level. Road to UFC. Yadam Seo. She beat her by unanimous decision. Then Isis Verbeek in the Contender Series. Then wins her UFC debut against Marnik Man, outstriking her 81-8 with 3 takedowns. Pilastri, actually 2 years younger, born March 1998. She lost on the Contender Series to Jasmine Jasudavicius. So it's hard to take a lot away from her. We could very easily look at Knudsen and think she's got a lot of UFC experience. But Pilastri, I think, is the more likely of the two to have gotten a lot better over the course of that. She had a really solid win over Patricia Lujas back in the Contender Series, September of 2023. And Pilastri being plus 150, I saw her at plus 170 earlier this week, and I think, or it even started off at plus 90, I'm seeing. So Pilastri, I still think makes some sense at plus 150. I think you got to give a lot of credit to Knudsen for making the best of all these opportunities. Marnik Man, though, she's 0-3 in the UFC, or at the UFC level. Losses to decent opponents, but still. I think that we don't know enough about these two, and I think I have liked what I've seen in terms of, Julia Pilastri, I think, is going to be able to really match the firepower of Josephine Knudsen. So, I don't know. I think Pilastri straight up plus 150. I think that this is about a 50-50 fight. And, I think Knudsen's getting a lot of credit for wins that we can't fully measure the quality of. So Pilastri plus 150, hit it. And I don't know, you could do by submission, or you could just do by decision and think that she's just the better overall fighter but won't be able to put Knudsen away. Because Knudsen's taken all 3 fights the distance and won all of them. So Pilastri by submission, that's plus 900. By decision, that's plus 225. That's probably the better one to go with. Knudsen by decision minus 110. That's the way to go with Josephine. Next up, we got a men's featherweight matchup between Weston Wilson and Jaka Saragih. Saragih, The minus 355 favorite, Weston Wilson, the plus 280 underdog. Weston Wilson, loser of 2 fights out of 2 in the UFC. His debut is against Joanderson Brito, July 2023. It's a tough debut. He got knocked out in the first round. Then he fights Gene Silva, January of this year, and gets knocked out in the first round again. Rough go at it for the dude born in 1989. But for the dude born in 1995, Jekka, winner of 3 of 4 at the UFC level, counting the road to UFC because he has 2 wins there. Knockout by spinning back fist, a first-round knockout against Wong Bing Ki. He has a loss in his UFC debut by second-round knockout to Anshul Jubli, but then he bounces back with a first-round knockout against Lucas Alexander. For a few reasons. This is a fight that I think that they would like to see Jekka win coming out of Indonesia. That's a good market to have. And he's looked good. The Lucas Alexander one is really validating, I think. And Weston Wilson has only shown that he can get knocked out in the first round at this level. I don't know if it'll necessarily happen in the first round, but it very well could for Jekka. So I would go Jekka. I think Jekka probably wins this fight. Right now, I can comfortably say 80 times out of 100. And that's more an indictment against Weston Wilson. In fact...
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
I feel like it's been a while since I've used that drop. Okay. So, yeah, more an indictment against Weston Wilson. I think the play is Jekka by knockout. That's minus 200. You could also go Jekka in round 1. That's minus 125. The fight to be under 2.5 rounds is minus 625. Under 1.5, minus 286. There's a few things that you can play around with in there, but I think you want Jekka and DFS definitely this week. But he's going to be expensive. You know that. Next up, we got a women's flyweight matchup between Carly Judas and Gabriela Fernandez. Fernandez, the minus 162 favorite. Judas, the plus 136 underdog. Judas, 3-1 as a professional fighter, 25 years old. Had a nice amateur career, 4-0, and then starts off in Cage Warrior Championship and Shogun fights. She never fought for the same promotion, twice in her professional career. Lost by split decision in the Contender Series to Ernesta Caracate. And now she's getting this fight against Gabriela Fernandez. 3-1 and a loss by split decision at the Contender Series, where she did land 168 strikes. She just got hit 184 times, that being the problem. Gabriela Fernandez, loser of 2 fights by unanimous decision at the UFC level. One was to Jasmine Jasdovicius, and the other was to Teresa Bleda, who outstruck her 57-23 with 3 takedowns. Bleda, someone who I didn't believe in a ton, but she did get destroyed by Natalia Silva. But 2-3 at the UFC level, counting the Contender Series, so actually not too bad of a loss. And you lose to Jasmine, who's a ranked flyweight, by unanimous decision just a little over a year ago. But you only got you outstruck Jasmine 26-24. You just got taken down 4 times. Judas, I don't think that is going to be, I think that Fernandez is just a little better suited to win. I mean, she won her professional record 8-3. She's a little bit older and, more experienced and, a little bit. She has 3 LFA wins, under her belt. Against good fighters. So, I can't blame you too much for losing to Jasmine, former Tap That guest, Jasmine Jasdovicius, and Teresa Bleda. Carly Judas, I would like to think that, this could be a close matchup, but there's just no reason for me to believe in a fighter who the combined record of her last 2 opponents that she beat was 4-6. So, for that reason, I think you go Gabriela Fernandez by decision, because I think Fernandez probably wins this fight 75 times out of 100, maybe 80. Fernandez by decision, that's plus 150. Hit it. And, I think it inside the distance plus 250, that's not crazy. It's just like we don't know much about Judas at all. And honestly, minus 162 is not a bad number straight up on Gabriella. Next up, we've got a men's welterweight. Why did I say men's welterweight? Welterweight matchup between Josh Keelan and Adam Fugit. Fugit is the plus 105 underdog. Josh is the minus 125 favorite. Let's start with Adam Fugit. Loser at 2-3 in the UFC. To Michael Morales and Mike Mallet. That's a tough two Mikes to have to face. He does have a win by first round knockout February 2023 against Yusako Kinoshita. Keelan will be at a 5-inch reach disadvantage. And this is a guy who, I don't know, there's the no contest on the Contender Series. He wins in a UFC debut by first round knockout over Jason Witt. And now he's lost 2 in a row. One to Trey Waters, and then he got knocked out in the third round against Danny Barlow. And I love Danny Barlow. This is another tough one. Kinoshita has been on a losing streak. For Keelan, I feel like he did have a bit of a rougher path through this. The Jason Witt win now is close to 2 years old. And, Fugit has at least been a little bit more, the success has been more recent. I don't know. Maybe this is one where you take Keelan by knockout. I don't think there's anything particularly special about Adam Fugit. And Keelan, I think, has at least given me, 2 sample sizes of things to believe in. And Danny Barlow, I can't blame you too much for that loss. So I don't know. This is another one I don't feel terribly good about. I think that this is a real toss-up, so I don't think that minus 125 for Keelan's bad. I think Josh by knockout plus 150. I think that makes sense. And for Fugit, I don't know. You probably go by knockout too, plus 350. I think Keelan by TKO knockout is probably the best way to go. And minus 125, if you're determined to place a bet on that fight, I think that's not bad. And if, the movement of this line started off as minus 115 for Keelan, so it hasn't been a big swing or anything. If Fugit gets up to I don't know, plus 110, 15, 25, something like that, it's a little bit more considerable. Next up, we've got a flyweight matchup between Jimmy Flick and Nate Maness. Jimmy Flick, the plus 425 underdog. Nate Maness, the minus 575 favorite.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie.
Jimmy Flick is a guy that I've given an unfortunately rough time to because I always confuse him with JP Buys. So, he's the winner at 3 of 5 at the UFC level. A win over Cody Durden with a first-round submission. Coming off a second-round arm triangle against Malcolm Gordon in a fight that, Malcolm Gordon should have had. And Jimmy Flick, was scrappy. And despite landing 3 strikes, either 4 submission attempts, gets the arm triangle. Anything that is a triangle, Jimmy Flick specializes in it. He does have 2 losses in between. He got knocked out twice by Charles Johnson and Alessandro Costa. Still, he was born in 1990, so he's older than I would, than I kind of think about. Nate Maness, though. All right. Wins over Johnny Munoz. Cool hand Luke Sanders. Tony Gravely with a second-round knockout. His only 2 losses in the UFC are to Umar Nurmagomedov, who, granted, dominated him in a unanimous decision win, and got subbed in round 1 by Tajir Ulanbekov. Now, he is coming off a first-round knockout win against Mateus Mendonca. So, Jimmy Flick has not had to face, he's only faced guys at these weights that, it's never been close to ranking contention. and Nate Maness, even though, the two guys that he lost to, how much can you possibly blame him for losses to Tajir and Umar? Umar's 5-0 in the UFC. So the quality of Nate's resume, I think, is unquestionably better than Jimmy Flick's. The thing is, does Jimmy Flick have an outside shot of a submission as a plus 425 underdog? Flick by submission is plus 700. That is not worth a small flyer, I think. I think the real thing is that, Jimmy Flick has shown that he is susceptible to getting rocked and getting knocked out, and that's going to be a problem against Nate Maness, and you can tell by TKO knockout, that's minus 250. I think realistically, Nate Maness does win, 80 to 85 of these out of 100, but I think all 15 to 20 that Jimmy Flick's getting, he's sneaking into submission, so plus 700, not bad. Nate Maness, I think, is worth your attention in DFS. And who knows, Jimmy Flick might be $6 or something. But probably still don't do that. Again, submission flyer, that's how he wins if he gets it done in a big upset. Next up, we got a flyweight matchup between Tagir Ulanbekov and Joshua Van. Joshua Van was supposed to fight Tatsuro Taira, and then Joshua Van is now fighting Tagir. Tagir is the minus 205 favorite, Joshua Van, the plus 170 underdog. All right, that's actually closer than I thought it would be. People love Joshua Van. I love Joshua Van. Won his first two in the UFC by decision, landed a combined 276 strikes across those two fights. He did get hit a combined 178 in his UFC debut was against August Zumagulov. The other one's against Kevin Boras, and then he's coming off a second-round knockout victory over Felipe Bunez. Tagir Ulanbekov. By the way, Joshua Van, born in 2001. Again, they made fighters this century. Tagir Ulanbekov, winner of 4 of 5. Decisions over Bruno Silva, Alan Nascimento. And then 2 straight submissions that he's coming off of against Nate Maness and Cody Durden. His only loss in the UFC is by unanimous decision to Tim Elliott. He outstruck Tim Elliott 90 to 79. Here's the real problem for Joshua Van. Takedowns for Tagir Ulanbekov. 2, 1, and those were in the fights that he finished. 2 in the one that he lost. 4 and 5. So, Joshua Van, if he just throws a lot of strikes and stays on his feet, then that's obviously where his world's going to need to be. But I don't think he's going to be able to stop Tagir Ulanbekov from taking him down. The question is, how do I think Tagir maybe gets it done? Because, Joshua Van has 1 loss in his career. It is by submission. And I think that, Tagir, I probably split this between Tagir by decision and Tagir by submission, which respectively are plus 200 and plus 175. I think those are actually both decent values, but I think they're very clearly the most likely methods of victory. Joshua Van by decision, I think, is the most realistic for him, plus 400, and then you go by knockout, and that's plus 500. Joshua Van, I think what could keep this fight from ending early is just the volume striking of Joshua Van. If he starts off with those cylinders firing, it's just going to make it harder for Tagir to get close to him, and it's just going to stifle some of the activity and make it harder for Tagir to have the time to finish it with his grappling. So that's kind of how I see that one playing out. I give the credit to Tagir's resume. A loss to Tim Elliott in a fight that very well, could have gone his way. It wasn't a split decision. It was unanimous 29-28, but on paper, very close. So this is a very intriguing matchup, and this is one that people are really looking forward to. I think that you look at both of these guys in DFS, I think it depending on the prices, could be well worth it. And this is an early one. This is a huge test for Joshua Van. And it's, for Tagir, it's, a higher prominence fight, but this is risky. So this is a high stakes matchup for the flyweight division. Next up, we got a bantamweight matchup between former Tap That guest Brady Highstand and Ultimate Fighter runner-up Brady Highstand, and Garrett Armfield, who was supposed to come on this show and did not hit me back after the initial inquiry. So, hope to have Garrett on the show someday. He is the minus 192 favorite, Highstand the plus 160 underdog. Garrett Armfield, winner of 2 of 3 in the UFC, lost his debut by second-round arm triangle to David Onama. Since then, 2-fight winning streak. First-round knockout over Toshiyomi Kazama, and he is coming off a unanimous decision victory against Brad Katona, outstriking him 105-64. He did get taken down 4 times. Brad Katona, the Ultimate Fighter winner, and is also coming off a win. Right? Yeah, that just happened this week against Jesse Butler. Again, by unanimous decision. Highstand has now won 2 in a row. Now, he lost the Ultimate Fighter finale to Ricky Tercios. That loss doesn't age super well. But, what are you going to say? That was a really close fight. It was a split decision loss. And he's looked great since then. Fernie Garcia, he was in some deep water in that fight. He was in some deep water against Dana Badgerall. And he wins by unanimous decision over... Wait, it was just against Dana Badgerall. But still, unanimous decision against Fernie Garcia in a low-scoring matchup. And then a third-round knockout against Dana Badgerall. After he had gotten knocked down at one point in the fight, he also got 3 takedowns. So, Brady Highstand, plus 160. It actually has, moved almost zero. This is kind of accurate. Garrett Armfield, I will give a lot of credit to a win like that over Brad Katona. Now, the thing is, Brad Katona and Brady Highstand are very, very different fighters. Brady Highstand is an animal. And Garrett Armfield has shown some glimpses of that as well. But, Brady Highstand has become a fan favorite pretty quickly for that reason. He's a dog. And when you can get a dog as a dog, you think harder. Well, plus 160, I think Brady Highstand is definitely going to have a chance against Garrett Armfield, a really good one, considering that, David Onama, was able to dispatch Garrett Armfield, and that was just, 2 years ago, and he's only fought twice in the UFC since then. So, Brad Katona just doesn't bring the volume. Brady Highstand, I think, will bring the volume, will bring the activity, the very active grappling. When you can get a spark plug like Brady Highstand plus 160, I think that the rule of late has been to go ahead and roll with that. So I think Brady Highstand probably wins 45 of these fights out of 100. Maybe a little bit more. It could be 49. Highstand by decision makes the most sense to me. That's plus 250. By submission is plus 900, which seems crazy. Garrett Armfield, I think that he probably wins this fight by decision in a similar... I don't think he knocks Brady Highstand out. I think that would be very hard to do. I think he would just have to be in his striking and grappling just being superior on the evening and not beating him like Brad Katona again, but I think the stats could end up similar in a fight that Garrett Armfield wins. By decision is plus 180. Brady Highstand might be a guy I'm looking to use in DFS too. I don't think for what Garrett Armfield might be priced that's what I'm looking to do. Next up, we got a flyweight matchup between Asu Almabayev and Jose Johnson. Almabayev, minus 600 favorite. Jose Johnson, the plus 440 underdog. Jose Johnson, by the way, is a 6-foot flyweight, born in 1995. It doesn't make any sense. 2-2 in the UFC, counting the Contender Series because he was on that twice. A win against Jack Cartwright, a loss to Ronnie Lawrence. And his other losses by first-round twister against Damone Blackshear. He's coming off a win by third-round rear naked choke November of last year against Chan Anheliger. Outstruck him 63-26, got taken down 4 times to 1. Azu Almabayev. This dude is coming off some real good wins. 19-2 as a pro. 30 years old. Hails from Kazakhstan. Currently ranked number 15 in the world, according to Tapology.com, whatever that means to you. Comes in from Brave CF. Starts his UFC career against O'Day Osborne wins by second-round rear naked choke, and then a unanimous decision over CJ Vergara, outstriking him 44-29 with 9 takedowns. And Vergara is a guy who has won more than he's lost in 7 fights in the UFC. So Asu's resume is super legit. And Jose Johnson's is not. Jose Johnson is a guy that it makes sense is, hovering still in the UFC. I think he's going to, probably, win one, lose a couple, win 1 out of 3. He's that kind of guy for flyweight, and that's fine. But like Asu Almabayev is the real deal, and very deservedly so is a -600 favorite. I think for Asu, I think that no matter what you do, I think you want him in DFS if you can afford him. If it's a decision, there's going to be a ton of takedowns, and he's going to lay on a little bit of steady ground and pound, or I think he submits him. Cause I think that those are very, evenly valued outcomes, because by submission's -110, by decision is +200. Those are the two easily the most likely outcomes of the fight. I don't like anything for Jose Johnson. I don't think those are good values. And yeah, I think Asu Almabayev probably wins this fight 85, 90 times out of 100, to be honest. This dude's for real at flyweight. Next up, and that's another great flyweight fight. That's going to be a good talking point for this division after this card is, where these guys fighting on Saturday have shuffled out. Next up, we got a bantamweight matchup between Douglas Silva de Andrade and Miles Johns. And hold on, what is the co-main event? It seems like we don't know. Is it Miles Johns and Douglas Silva de Andrade? I'm seeing it all over the place on Tapology and UFC stats. That just seems crazy, considering that there's other really good flyweight. I guess they just didn't want to do that and have a bunch of flyweight fights headlining, okay? And maybe it could have ended up being the Andre Arlovski-Martin Bidet fight. That's just... Why even call it a co-main event at that point? Anyway, I'm going to talk about Douglas Silva de Andrade and Miles Johns. Silva de Andrade, the +120 underdog. Miles Johns, the -142 favorite. I love Miles Johns. I feel like I've picked him a lot over the last few, but he hasn't actually fought that much. So that's kind of a fallacy. Won 2 of his last 3, because technically the last fight against Dan Argueta was overturned. So, so whatever, 2 decision wins over Vince Morales and Cody Gibson. Beat Cody Gibson, outstruck him 25-18, 2 takedowns to 1. Nothing special about that win, and there really wasn't anything special about the Vince Morales win. You'd have to go back to August of 2021 for a Miles Johns knockout, and he had 2 in a row. But against Anderson Dos Santos and Kevin Natividad, by the way, the main event of PFL right now, Moldavsky and Linton Vassell is happening. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. Douglas Silva de Andrade, on the other hand, winner of 3 of his last 4. 2 finishes in that. Now, his activity level, he hasn't fought in over a year. And, only had 2 fights in 2022. So, only 3 fights really in the last 2 years. Rear naked choke victory over Sergey Morozov. A unanimous decision loss to Said Nurmagomedov. And he's coming off a unanimous decision win against Cody Stamann, May of 2023. Outstruck him 61-54, survived the knockdown. It has a win over Renan Barão, too. This is a guy that's been in the UFC off and on since 2014, which is insane. He's fought Rob Font, Chito Vera, Piotr Jan, Renan Barão, Lerone Murphy. So, I don't know. I thought I was going to like Miles Johns a little bit more, and I don't. I think, if you want to grind out a decision with Douglas Silva de Andrade, if you want to, wherever you want to take it, I think that, Douglas Silva de Andrade is actually just, a little bit better. I trust him more. I trust, the success he's had of late. He started off at -110 and has moved to +115. And now is at +120. So Silva de Andrade, I think that this is like a fight he wins like 55 times out of 100. I'm more impressed with what Douglas Silva de Andrade has done over Miles Johns. That win against Cody Gibson was just okay. At least it was a 2024 fight. And it just was not like super impressive. So I would go, I think plus 120 on DSDA, hit it. Hit it again. And, I think outcome-wise, by decision, plus 330, makes sense. By submission, plus 1,200. That seems nuts. By decision, plus 330. By knockout, plus 300. Why would I think that would be the case? Now, I go by decision for Douglas Silva de Andrade. I think that these guys, I think that they can both slow it down. And I think if it goes that way, just like not a lot's going to happen. I'm interested to see how these styles contrast and work, to create this fight. But, I think Douglas Silva de Andrade is just a bargain at plus 120. I'm not too interested in either in DFS, though, to be honest. Next up, let me make sure I've gotten everything with the way that all right. 2 fights to go. We got a featherweight matchup between Timmy Kawamba and Lucas Almeida. Kawamba, the minus 192 favorite. Almeida, the plus 160 underdog. Kawamba won on the Contender Series over Mateo Vogel. I like Mateo Vogel up there in Canada. Let me make sure. I don't need to make sure. Pretty sure that's him. Yeah, the dude up in, what's it? BFL. Up there in Canada. Unanimous decision win over him in the Contender Series. He did get outstruck in that fight 67-43 and taken down once. Lost by split decision February of this year to Bolaji Oki. Got outstruck 60-33. They each got a takedown. Lucas Almeida and by Timmy Kawamba, born February of 1999. Lucas Almeida, born in 1991. And this is the thing for Lucas Almeida, is like, this has been a tough road in the UFC. The Contender Series, he fights Daniel Zellhuber, loses by decision, even though he lands 96 strikes because he got hit 115 times. Then, in his real UFC debut, gets a third-round knockout against Michael Trezano, outstriking him 75-31, survives a knockdown, gets 2 of his own in that fight. He gets subbed early by Pat Sabatini, and he gets knocked out in round 1 against Andre Fili. That's not a super easy go of it, for Lucas Almeida. Kawamba, this is like a real problem where, you've got 2 fights that went a combined 6 rounds. You've landed 76 strikes, and you've had 127 landed against you. So the Oki fight was close. And the Vogel fight was close, at least statistically. And I think that the PFL main event, I think it was a nut shot, no contest, is what it seems like. That's a giant bummer. That's some PFL and Bellator stuff for that main event to end in a nut shot. Anyway, I think I have to go Lucas Almeida. I understand the losses, but you looked good against guys like Trezano and Zellhuber. Even though that was, 2 years ago, Kawamba, if you're having those problems with Mateo Vogel and Balaji Oki, who, granted has 2, Contender Series level wins, I think Almeida makes the most sense. I think that Almeida wins, 40 to 45 to 50 of these out of 100 for real. Plus 160, hit it. I don't hate Almeida by knockout, that's plus 350. Almeida by decision, plus 600. So I don't know. I think Almeida could I think plus 600 is a nice, shot, considering that, he's had the fights where he hasn't needed to finish his opponent, or at least didn't finish them over 96 strikes. And I don't think Kawamba can keep up with that volume. So that's where I go there, and I think if you go Kawamba, I don't know, you go by decision, plus 250. I'm just not inspired by Kawamba yet. So that's just a reason, alone to believe in Lucas Almeida's. I just, we've seen him in the UFC and against recognizable names and has a win over one of them. And, I think that this is a get-right spot for him. But now, we are on to the main event of the evening.
Break out the red panties.
Oh, okay. The main event of PFL is not over. The fight is back on. It is the first round about to end. That's awesome. Main event of UFC Vegas 93, a flyweight matchup, much anticipated, between Alex Perez, the plus 164 underdog, Tatsuro Taira, the minus 198 favorite. Tatsuro Taira, undefeated, 15-0. Alex Perez, the former title challenger, they're currently ranked number 8. Perez and number 12, Taira, in the world at flyweight, according to Tapology.com. And this fight is crazy, right? Because now you looked at the stack of prospects, the Albazis, the Tairas, the Ursegs, did I say the Makayevs? And then there's Manel Kape. There was we were sitting there wondering, after the same flyweight title fight for like 2 years, we were wondering for, how are they going to advance these prospects forward? And, now even more guys have entered that conversation. And then Usyk gets the title shot and does something with it, and had a close fight. And a lot of people, there's plenty of people that thought he won that fight. I did not think that he won that fight, but it's clear that the UFC would like someone else besides Alexander Pantoja to be the champion. But he has, been fantastic. People hate him. And this is, anyway, the point of that is that this fight for Tatsuro Taira could be huge. If Usyk got a title shot after beating Matt Schnell, at least because they know that Australia is going to be behind him, Tatsuro Taira could be a no-brainer. You got the Makayev and Kape matchup, and Amir Albazi's still out there, so this is a critical win for Tatsuro Taira if he can get it. And Alex Perez, after coming off that win against Matheus Nicolau April of this year, he lost 3 in a row to Deiveson Figueiredo, who was a champion, and it was for the title. He was away for a while, loses to Alexander Pantoja, the current champion, loses a decision to Muhammad Makayev, and then bounces back with a second-round knockout over Matheus Nicolau. That's good stuff. And Tatsuro Taira, on the other hand, this is a guy that they brought along steadily. I'd say that every name on his resume is a good one. It's good. Carlos Candelario, CJ Vergara, who he finished with an armbar. Jesus Aguilar, who he finished with a triangle armbar. Edgar Chairez, who he beat by decision, and Carlos Hernandez, who he beat by second-round knockout. Taira is a finisher, and, can do it in a variety of ways. You love to see that. Matheus Nicolau, that is a good win for Alex Perez. It kept him relevant. They're using him as a gatekeeper of the, a certain class of this division still. And I was wrong to pick against Alex Perez before. It's just who have we seen Alex Perez beat? A guy like Nicolau. And even you have to go back before that to find a win. June 2020 against Josier Formiga. I've talked extensively on the non-impressive winning streak that got him his title shot. And before, that fight with Deiveson Figueiredo, I'm sitting there thinking,
don't do this, you cannot do this,
So there's just a certain level of fighter in this division he doesn't seem capable of beating. Is it too early for Tatsuro Taira? I don't think so, because I think Tatsuro Taira, for the spots where it looks like he maybe isn't doing enough, I do think that he is a more dynamic talent than Muhammad Makayev and a little bit more well-rounded. So I think that's going to cause problems for Alex Perez. I could see the success that people have had against Tatsuro Taira. It just hasn't been much. He has just shut people down. He did get knocked down by Edgar Chairez. And I just don't know if that is how Alex Pereira is going to do his damage. But, that's what he's going to need to do. He's going to need to hurt Tatsuro Taira. Really, I think, again, that, like, Tairade is a prospect that is worthy of the hype. You know, he's a guy that it would make sense if he beat Alex Perez, if, you know, especially after the Usyk matchup, you know, with Alexander Pantoja. Anything really makes sense for a guy who's a prospect in this weight class. It just kind of comes down to, like, convenience and, like, in, you know, right now, I think that they would be happy putting in Tatsuro Taira, Amir Albazi, or Muhammad Makayev. Because the Usyk fight kind of turned into an interesting thing. So I think Tatsuro Taira does win this fight like 65, 70 times out of 100. Tatsuro Taira started off minus 170, and people were hitting that. I think, like, you know, Perez did get finished in 2 of his last 3 matchups. Granted, the people who did that were Figueiredo and Pantoja. Muhammad Makayev wasn't able to finish him. Tatsuro Taira could. You know, inside the distance, plus 100 for Taira. I don't hate that. It's funny right now in the PFL main event, Linton Vassell having a better second round, which is not what we would have thought. Better than the first round. That is not Linton Vassell's MO. Anyway, I think Perez by, like, you know, Perez inside the distance, that's plus 300. Perez by TKO knockout, that's plus 400. Those are very similar values to me. I think it's going to be harder to submit Tatsuro Taira. We've seen him get hurt, you know, on the feet. And Taira, you know, inside the distance, that's where I'm comfortable, plus 100. By decision, that's plus 400. I don't know, across 5 rounds, and it probably happens before you get to those main event rounds, but especially considering that it's a 5-round fight, I think Taira's ready for that. And I think that he can damage Perez enough early, at least to wear him down, to help navigate the learning curve of those, the 4th and 5th round if it comes to it. So that's where I'm going. Tatsuro Taira inside the distance, plus 100. Minus 198, still not like a horrible number. And I don't know, you know, DFS, let's see where he's priced. I see Taira being a better value in DFS, even though he's going to be more expensive. But I'm looking forward to the flyweight action this weekend. It's the UFL Championship game on Sunday. I'm going to be writing an MMA DFS values picks article for RotoBaller moving forward after the UFL Championship game. Again, another big week in MMA. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady for my picks on all major combat sports events. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Come out to the RotoBaller MMA Discord on Saturday. Let's talk about UFC Vegas 93. And folks, that is it for episode 139 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that. Happy Father's Day to all you folks out there this weekend. Use that time to enjoy these fights in the UFL Championship game. Thanks for listening. Have a good one. Peace.